Hello, BookTube. I've got a little mail for you today. A beautiful, beautiful sunny day. I did mail yesterday, but I didn't upload the video. I didn't even finish it because it got to the point about 20 minutes in where I was screaming at the camera, veins popping out on my neck, veins popping out on my forehead, screaming at the camera. Not in this case about anything that I was reading in the packages, but simply to overcome the neighborhood noise. I was screaming at the top of my lungs to overcome the noise that was audible on camera. And I realized after a few minutes of that for one reason or another, it was just going to stay that way. Tanks, trucks, sirens, fire engines, attack helicopters, bombs going off. I realized after a while that it was just going to continue that way. And of course it didn't. I had only a narrow window to make videos. And when I stopped that and just said, all right, forget about this. You can't do it. You can't be heard. You're screaming over the background noise. I stopped that, and maybe 10 minutes later, all the noise had gone away. You could hear only birds and bees in the flowers. But the moment was gone. So we're going to try this again. Hope for the best. Hope I'm not screaming in 20 minutes. This won't be 20 minutes. This is a small mail haul. We have a few... Excuse me. We have a few periodicals and a couple of packages. Like, for instance, we have Good Housekeeping, which for some reason I still get. I noticed right away the dog on the cover is a beagle. It's a cavorting beagle. And this had a couple of... See, there's a attack helicopter. Maybe you can't hear it that well yet. They're subduing the next town over. They've rebelled again. This has an interesting lifestyle feature in the middle here about assuring its readers, who I assume demographically skew very old, that it's not too late. There's a 2-page article in here with a stopwatch where it tells them it's not too late. It's not too late to prioritize your mental health. Because God forbid we don't think about that enough. It's not too late to start exercising. Entirely true. Some very sensible pieces of advice here on how to get started. It's not too late to get really into sex. That ship sailed for some of us a long time ago. But it's also not too late to have satisfying relationships, unless you come from South Boston. That's probably possible. Not to make it too late to make a career pivot. Very interesting thing. Once upon a time, I would have said that also was mental health jingo, and that it didn't really apply, but it does. I have learned as I approach 30 that it does, and that you can be as settled as you want in your career, and you might have to make a career pivot. It might not be just a question of wanting to. You might have to. And it doesn't always work poorly. It can sometimes be a thing that brings a smile to your face. It's not too late to quit smoking. 2 paragraphs on how to do that. And it's not too late to boost your brain power. Let's see what they say for that. Even if you feel a little foggy now and then, you're not doomed to develop dementia. One thing you can do now to help your mind stay sharp is learn new things. In 2020 study, people ages 58 to 86 took 3 to 5 classes concurrently in subjects such as Spanish, photography, and how to use an iPad for 3 months. Midway through, students had improved their cognitive ability to levels similar to those of adults 30 years younger. Learn new things. I would also strongly advise make things. Make things will keep you mentally young. And also, make sure that you know young people. Don't limit yourself to either making no friends at all, which is way too common in America anyway. I'm sure that that studies show it's common throughout the world. It's way too common in America that people just, after the age of 30, stop making friends. Nothing could be less healthy, socially and mentally. But also, as you get very much older, as you pass 50 or maybe 60, you want to make sure that you keep a large coterie of young friends. Not only to stop you from the absolute demon scourge of being condescending. You don't ever want to be condescending at any point in your life to anybody. And the surest way to avoid that is to keep young friends. But also because they keep you on your toes. So I would urge that. But also, when I saw that article, I also went looking in this magazine, as I do anywhere, you know already. I go looking for anything related to books. A square-bound glossy magazine like this will almost always have at least something perfunctory to do with books. And this one did. It has a 2-page spread of spring reads. And we are told, restock your personal library with these new books handpicked by senior editor and resident book buff Liz Schumer, who reads dozens of titles a month to find out the perfect ones for you. And here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 books, and they're all pictured here in full colors. Nice little display here. That's new Ramona Acebel. And they're all by women. They're all contemporary fiction by women. I'm guessing that Liz Schumer does not ever recommend books by men. So she reads dozens of books a month, but in a cloistered and extremely sexist way. So I'm not sure that her recommendations would be good, even if the books she ends up centering on are any good. As it turns out, none of the 7 books that she mentions this time around are any good. Not because they're written by women, but because they're as light as tissue. They won't satisfy a reader at all. A dabbler, maybe. But that was good housekeeping, and it was kind of interesting. There were design things. There were design issues in here. One in particular that just drove me round the bend. This thing right here, this bedroom right here. Look at that. Again, with the fad of making sure that when you are laying in bed, you cannot see out the window. You cannot see your own view. How utterly ridiculous. But even worse in this case, because this headboard and this wall right here are the same width. This is calling for the right arrangement. The room itself is telling you the right arrangement, which is, of course, to swing this thing around so the headboard is right here, so that you are looking out the window all the time when you're laying on the bed. Of course, that is the natural thing to do. This is ridiculously unnatural, especially when this is the same width as this. Just put it there. But anyway, I didn't want to work myself into a frenzy about that. I also got the Martha's Vineyard Gazette, black and white broadsheet newspaper from Martha's Vineyard off the coast of Massachusetts. I am not in this particular issue, but I love reading it anyway. And I got the new TLS, which has as its cover review a review of that book, Winnie and Nelson, that double biography that I think I mentioned on this channel a couple of times. I got it's a big, fat, finished thing. And I kind of thought that it would be weak, I was expecting it to be a weak book. It's not at all. It's a really strong book, a really good double biography, and also very hard-hitting. No hagiography at all on to Nelson Mandela or Winnie Mandela. It'd be hard. You'd think it would be hard to be hagiographic about either one of them. Their hands were not clean, but plenty of biographers and writers have done that. So I was expecting the worst, and I didn't get it at all. So very interesting to see who did the write-up on here. The write-up was fantastic, just fantastic. Who did that? Andrew Harding did the review of that, and it was terrific. Anne Lawson Lucas does a review of the new translation by Michael Moore of Manzoni's The Betrothed, and actually asked the title of the review is let's see if we can quickly find it here, because it was so weird. It was so weird to see the title. Well, of course, if I'm looking for it, I'm not going to find it. But let's give it a try here. The title of the review is Italy's Greatest Novel. Is there any doubt about that? I mean, literally, does anyone doubt that? I didn't know that anyone doubted that, so that was kind of weird. There's also a long review here of that big new volume of the collected translations of Seamus Heaney. And there's another book that's reviewed in here that I either want to read or have already written a review of. Let's take a look through here. A couple of works of classical history that I don't have, that I really want. One from Cambridge University. They're both from Cambridge. One is by Peter Thoneman, The Lives of Ancient Villages, and the other is by Paul Jacobs, and it is The Lives of a Roman Neighborhood. And I don't have either one of those. I don't really have much truck with Cambridge University Press. I should probably fix that. But there was another thing in here that... oh, yes. This thing, which I think we've seen on this channel. There's a new book by Carolyn Larrington about Norse mythology, about Norse myths. And it gets a nice write-up in here by Eleanor Rosamond Barraclough, but this is the picture that they chose. The QAnon shaman who stormed the Capitol on January 6th. That's the picture that they chose to illustrate a book on Norse mythology. So, those were the periodicals. And now we'll do the packages. No boxes, just 2 packages. And we'll see if we can get through this without the neighborhood erupting in noise. That makes me cancel the video. Oh, great. Okay. Now, all right. This first one is a pleasure to see. This has got to be a June release. Yes. Let's get you out of there. Yes, mid-June. This is the new book by Chris Offwood. I really, really recommend this author. I really, really do. If you're in the mood for atmospheric noir, for action-adventure, for crime, small-town crime, that sort of thing, but you maybe read a lot of it and are really leery about it because a lot of it is so bad. You definitely need to find this author and read his stuff because he is the real deal, just amazingly so. I often recommend Chris McKinty along those lines, but this guy is just as good. Set in Appalachia, I think. Most of them are. But let's see what we have here. This is Code of the Hills. It's a Mick Harden novel by Chris Offutt. Let's see. This is the finished copy. There is our author on a rocking chair. And he has written The Killing Hills, Shifty's Boys, Country Dark, The Good Brother. Country Dark, if you don't love that book, I mean, I absolutely loved it. I went into it without any expectation, no knowledge at all, and I absolutely loved it. And I loved it despite the fact that the main character, who ends up being the action hero of the book, literally never stopped smoking in the entire course of the novel. In gunfights, during sex, while being shot, literally never. You would think that would be annoying enough so that I wouldn't like the book. Instead, I loved it, just because of the literary virtuosity of the author. So I strongly recommend find this guy at your library and see if Country Dark doesn't win you over. I bet it will. And when it does, well, you'll have a new author to follow, which is great. That's always a great feeling. So what do we got here? Nobody writes about the Appalachian hills of eastern Kentucky like Chris Offutt. Absolutely true. There's only one other author I know of that writes about them at all, but not with this kind of zing. No way. From the blood feuds to the colorful dialogue to the can't get there from here geography that proves a fertile breeding ground for a crime novel, Offutt knows this inside and out. And that phrase, can't get there from here, you might think, oh, well, that's a standing joke, because of course you can get everywhere from everywhere. If you drive around in the Appalachian Mountains, in the foothills and hollers of eastern Kentucky, you will really feel that way. You will get to places, I have been over every inch of that ground with dogs, and you will get to places that you honestly take you days to get there. And you don't think that anybody goes there. It's amazing. It's a little bit foreboding, because back up in the twists and turns of those hollers and deep in those forests and gullies, there are people who have lived there for centuries, and often off the grid the whole time. It's a wild experience. I don't recommend it for a beginner. Just drive on the highways and look at the pretty mountains if you're a beginner. If you're going through the state, fine. If you're traveling in the state, you gotta have your wits about you. And if you're in areas like that, way up in the back of beyond, way up in the hollers, you really have to know how to deal with strangers. I had a little magic get out of jail free card in that the strangers' dogs, who were outside their whole time, fed on scraps, absolutely vicious to outsiders, were not vicious to me, and that was an immediate so-called conversation starter. That won't be true with you. So don't go into those areas unless you're good with people, obviously. But anyway, what do we got here? This book marks a blistering return to master storyteller and award-winning Chris Offutt's acclaimed crime series, in which ex-Army CID agent Mick Harden is tested like never before as the familiar allegiances and old wounds collide. Mick Harden is back in the hills of Kentucky. He'd planned to touch down briefly before heading to France, marking the end of his 20-year Army career. In Rock Salt, his sister Linda, the sheriff, is investigating the murder of Pete Lowe, a sought-after mechanic at the local racetrack. After another body is found, Linda and her deputy, Johnny Boy Tolliver, wonder if the two murders are related. Linda steps into harm's way just as a third body turns up, and Mick ends up being deputized again, uncovering evidence of illegal cockfighting and trying to connect all the crimes. So this is the paperback of Shifty's Boys. That's coming out soon, I think, or probably out now. Very good. Can't wait. Mid-June. I'll write a review of this thing just to try and boost its profile. I think the author doesn't need any help from me. It's absolutely wonderful. So, great. Fantastic. All right, so we have a finished copy of Code of the Hills. I think we saw the advanced copy of that here. And then we've got one more package to do. And so far, the neighborhood is behaving itself. No explosions, no gunfire, no helicopters strafing the neighborhoods, no nothing like that. That's wonderful. That's all I want, is for it to behave itself like normal so that you people don't get the impression that I live in the noisiest place in the world. Oh, we have another crime novel. Okay. This is from the folks at Soho Press. This is Naomi Hirahara. This is Evergreen, a Japantown novel. This is the advanced copy. This thing comes out in August. Long, hot summer from now. Let's see here. The tragic history of Japanese Americans in the aftermath of the Manzanar concentration camps combines with a brilliantly plotted mystery in Evergreen. which is the author's follow-up to her book Clark and Division. Did we see Clark and Division on this channel? Don't remember if we did or not. Post-war Los Angeles has been long a fertile grounds for crime fiction. It's easy to picture the gray flannel suits, giant automobiles, and ubiquitous fedora that have been de rigueur for generations of West Coast crime novels. Okay, smarty pants, whoever wrote this. The plural of fedora is fedoras, with an S. Okay, so it's not fedora for the whole crowd. Anyway. Hirahara's evergreen will certainly satisfy fans of crime fiction's most celebrated city and era, but one thing that needs to be clear, this isn't Elroy or MacDonald. This is Naomi Hirahara, and the award-winning author of Clark and Division once again draws on her extensive work as a historian to deliver a fascinating and thought-provoking mystery novel of cultural importance. Okay. All right. So your book has cultural importance, and you want to assure us that you are not anything like the two authors of LA crime fiction who are most revered and who we most love. A little bit of a dodgy approach there, and I worry, of course, when I read something like that in a pub sheet. Keep in mind, this is just a pub sheet. This isn't the book. The book could easily rise above this, but when I read something like that in the pub sheet, I automatically want to think, well, you'll be different from Elroy and MacDonald, because in this book, automatically all the men will be the bad guys. Which makes you different than them, yes, but it makes you worse than them. Let's see here. We get a paragraph of biographical information about the author. California-born daughter of survivors of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima, dedicated her career to recording the Japanese-American experience. In her early days in journalism, as a reporter and editor at the Rafu Shimpo, Los Angeles' 118-year-old Japanese-American newspaper, she covered the reparations movement for Japanese Americans who had been forcibly removed from their homes during World War II. In the 30 years since, her research and advocacy has yielded critically acclaimed reportage, nonfiction ethnographies, and topical histories, groundbreaking curatorial work, and of course, award-winning crime fiction, like 2001's hugely successful Clark and Division. I can't remember if I've read Clark and Division. Evergreen is very much a standalone novel, but the names will be familiar to readers of the earlier one. It's 1946, and Aki Ito and her family have moved back to Los Angeles 2 years after the family was released from Manzanar detention centers and resettled in Chicago with other Japanese Americans. Now the Ito family have finally been allowed to return home to California, but nothing is as they left it. The entire Japanese American community is starting from scratch, with thousands of people living in dismal refugee camps while they struggle to find new houses and jobs in overcrowded LA. Aki is working as a nurse's aide in a Japanese hospital in Boyle Heights when an elderly Issei man is admitted with suspicious injuries. When she seeks out his son, she is shocked to recognize her husband's best friend. Could he be guilty of elder abuse? Only a few days later, Little Tokyo is rocked by a murder at the low-income hotel where that best friend had been staying. When the cops start sniffing around, she begins to wonder that the violence tearing at her community might threaten her family. Okay. All right. Fantastic. So this is a murder mystery in post-war LA, which the pub sheet is right, is a very familiar ground for murder mysteries, but obviously with a different twist. Obviously with a whole bunch of other things going on, literally grounded in a world that is absent from those more famous LA noir crime novels. The only question I will have is a familiar one on this channel. Is this book critiquable? Is it meant to be critic-proof? If I say, well, yes, the backgrounding is interesting, but the characters are all flat, will I be called a racist? It sounds like a silly question, but in 2023, you have to ask that question. You have to ask whether or not this is written to be applauded rather than reviewed. I don't know anymore with a lot of books. I could actually be true for this as well, though I haven't noticed it. There is a strain of what I call hick lit that is meant only to be applauded. The authors have incredibly thin skin, and if you say, well, this plot doesn't make any sense. You've got a character over here in this chapter, and then mysteriously she's over here in the next chapter with no mention whatsoever. And, that's kind of amateurish, and you should have caught that and fixed it in the final draft of the novel. If you say that to some hick-lit authors, the very first thing they'll talk about is how their single mother raised them in a trailer park. Those two things are not connected. right? If you're writing a memoir, they're not connected. If you're writing a novel, they're certainly not connected. And the same thing here, but I don't know. I don't remember Clark and Division. I'm going to have to check my notes and see if I actually did read that book. And I'm not imputing anything to the author. This could easily be really, really good. It's just a worry that I have to have, given the circumstances, given the time in which we live. So that's great. Actually, 2 different publishers, but 2 murder mysteries. I'm always up for reading murder mysteries. This is just one mail delivery of the day. And of course, there was mail yesterday that I'm going to have to show you those books as, just organically as time goes on, because I opened them on camera and the video wasn't usable. This one is. And there's going to be more mail today. I will set it aside. I feel like I owe you a mail haul, even though I am crushed with work. So I will wrap this up for now, and we'll deal with those other books in due time. And I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.